Good evening. Thank you. I'm also trying to let people in the waiting room, so just bear with me, or out of the waiting room. Thank you. My name is Karen Herron. I have the honor of serving as the executive director of Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence, and I really appreciate all who are here this evening. You have just watched our 2024 memorial, a tribute to Marylanders we lost to gun violence in this past year. Each of those 353 names represents a life taken too soon, leaving behind grieving families, friends, and communities. These names reflect deaths caused by gun violence, including firearm-related homicide in 2024. But there are others whose stories remain untold, those who died by suicide, adding at least another 300 or so lives. Those names are not included here, but their absence is no less deeply felt. We hope this memorial serves as a reminder that the losses are real, that every name represents a person with dreams, with relationships, and a place in their community. As we work towards solutions, we hold close the hope that our efforts will mean that fewer families are grieving, fewer names added to this list, and more lives lived fully. So thank you for being here with us tonight, and for being part of this shared commitment to change. Before we get started, I'll lay out the event. I'll cover a few housekeeping items. I'm going to recognize any attending legislators and board members. So to help me out, if that fits your description, if you could raise your hand, that'll sort of pop you up to the beginning, to the top of my screen, and make it a little bit easier for me to call you out. And while we are waiting for folks to do that, I'll ask that you keep your mics muted for the duration of the event, unless, of course, you are one of the speakers. This evening, you'll hear first from each of our bill sponsors on the priority bills. And I will talk then a little about gun violence data and messaging and ways for advocates to get involved. We really hopefully will have a few minutes left over at the end, time for questions and answers. And also, you've probably already noticed this, but this is being recorded, and we will post a shareable version of this to YouTube as soon as possible afterward. So we're joined by our fairly new board member and now board president, Robin Elliott. So thanks for being here tonight, Robin. Also Delegate Jessica Feldmark from District 12A. And if I get anyone's district wrong, please just tell me. I saw your name on the list, so I could look it up ahead of time. And then, of course, we've got our sponsors, but I'll talk about them in a little more detail actually right about now. So thank you all for joining this evening. I really, it means so much that you're here. It is now, we're going to jump right into things. My honor to introduce Senator Shelley Hettleman from District 11 in Baltimore County. Senator Hettleman is the chair of the Senate Rules Committee and is jointly assigned to Budget and Taxation. Her accomplishments are honestly too vast for me to list here, but I will highlight that she served 3 years on judicial proceedings, and she has always been a true champion for gun safety in Maryland. So please join me in welcoming Senator Hettleman here to introduce us to the Family and Law Enforcement Safety Act, one of our priority efforts this year.
Thank you so much, Karen. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you and to be working on this bill with my wonderful House colleague, Vice Chair Sandy Bartlett from Anne Arundel County. And it is just, we have worked on a number of things together in prior years, and this year we have a handful of bills that we're working on together. And there is a wonderful coalition of different organizations along with this group that is advocating for this bill. And so I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to work on it. Just a little bit by way of my background too, many years ago, almost 30 years ago, I actually helped to start a domestic violence program. And the reason I mention that here is because this bill very much deals with the intersection of domestic violence and guns, and really that toxic combination, each in its own right, can be very dangerous, and the combination of the two even more so. So the purpose of this bill is to address some of those really, really important issues. Gun violence, as we know and experience, unfortunately, fairly regularly, is closely linked to domestic violence. And it also exacerbates the lethality of domestic violence. Each year, an average of 47 Marylanders lose their lives due to domestic violence. And that does not include the myriad people associated with those homicides, the ripple effects on loved ones, etc., and people who may be injured in the course of those events also. In Maryland, a gun is used in almost 3 out of 4 all domestic violence deaths. And we know from lots of research that has been done, an abuser that has a firearm is 5 times more likely to kill their victim. We have looked at our current law and determined that there is a lack of consistency in enforcement across jurisdictions and uneven protection of survivors. And this bill seeks to address those gaps within the civil protection order process. We know that survivors often, unfortunately, are not can at times not be very forthcoming in terms of sharing information about the use of a firearm in the abusive dynamic that exists often in intimate partner violence. And the materials that are used by the courts and in the courts by the judges is often insufficient to suss out those issues. And so one of the things that we hope to do in this legislation is to make it abundantly clear to the court what firearm or firearms exist in the household and how they have been used to threaten in this case, the person who is filing for a protection order. Right now, judges have the ability to remove firearms from individuals who threaten to harm their intimate partners at the temporary stage, but they are not required to. So this legislation would, at the interim and the temporary protection order stage, require a judge with good cause to order that the firearm be removed. And we know from lots of folks who are in this work on the ground that ensuring abusers comply with those rules can be very difficult and challenging. And we also know that 24 different jurisdictions in our state have virtually 24 different processes for that. And there is not a ton of accountability to ensure within the law enforcement community or the judiciary to ensure that that relinquishment happens. So that is an increased risk. We know from the dynamics of domestic violence that when someone is trying to change their situation, trying to leave, or trying to involve the criminal justice system, that can be the most dangerous time in a person's life. And it's also, frankly, very dangerous potentially for law enforcement. And so that's hence the name that Karen mentioned of the bill. So what does this bill do? It requires firearm removal when there is good cause during the protection order process, and it evens out the system that varies across jurisdictions by strengthening that protection order system. It requires immediate firearm relinquishment during the proceedings. It says that they have 24 hours from the time of service to surrender the firearm to law enforcement or a federally licensed gun dealer. They have to provide written proof of relinquishment. If they don't own a firearm and it's alleged that they do, they have to submit an affidavit to the court under penalty of perjury that they don't own it anymore. And we also create a work group that will look at implementation of a system of accountability. We're in very tough budget times right now. We've had discussions with the judiciary, we've had discussions with the chiefs and sheriffs, and there are a variety of options out there to ensure accountability, whether that's a follow-up hearing, whether that is a visit by law enforcement. And we know that if we include those pieces right now, we will have an accompanying fiscal note That is, every bill gets a fiscal note, which agencies determine how much it will cost them to implement the legislation, that will be through the roof. And we have been told by our leadership that any legislation with fiscal notes over a certain amount, which is pretty low this year, is virtually DOA. And so we have decided that we should take the time, and we've also consulted with national experts that tell us that the most effective processes are those that have the buy-in of the people involved in doing them, which is common sense to me. And so we will take time over the next year to convene this pretty small stakeholder group and to determine what the elements are that should hold our reforms accountable, to hold law enforcement accountable for the service of the protection order, for the removal of the firearm, and for the follow-up to ensure that those things happen. So we don't have a bill number yet. We are in drafting. We've had a bit of a back and forth with our bill drafter. And as soon as we get a bill number, I know some of you have reached out to us asking for that number. We will make sure to share it with you and look forward to working in partnership with you to get this across the finish line over our next, I have to look because I have a stack here, next 75 days. So we really appreciate the opportunity, and I will end there. Thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator. I apparently only calculate to actual sine die because I had it at 74. So I was like, wait, 75? You probably are looking for the next day. So thank you very much for that explanation and for all of the work you are doing on this. We are also joined tonight by Delegate Sandy Bartlett, Vice Chair of Judiciary. Delegate Bartlett is coming from District 32 in Anne Arundel County and is someone who is an absolute pleasure to work with on gun safety legislation. She was instrumental in getting Jalen's Law over the finish line finally in 2023 and is a calm and rational voice of reason on judiciary, which is something I'm extremely grateful for. This year, she's the House sponsor on the bill that Senator Hettleman was just discussing, the Family and Law Enforcement Safety Act. So thank you for being here this evening, Delegate Bartlett.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I don't know if my husband would agree with you with being a calm presence, but I try to be. So yes, thank you. I am from District 32 in Anne Arundel County, just to let you know. That is Maryland, the airport all the way down from Maryland Live and Laurel Park. And so we encompass quite a large area. With that said, I have personally experienced a situation right across from my house in Laurel where there was gun violence. Unfortunately, there were 3 individuals shot. One was a minor. The minor had severe injuries, and his mom and dad were killed. Actually, it was 3 people. The mom and dad were killed, and the shooter was killed. With that said, Karen said it, and she hit it right on the head when she said that, or maybe it was Senator Hettleman, but the point is that the effect of gun violence is very long lasting, as you all know, and very far reaching. So because we are in the climate that we're in with respect to individual conflict resolution is not always done through words or kindness or peacefully going some peaceful resolution. I think this bill is quite timely. And I love the title, Family and Law Enforcement Protection Act, because that is what the bill is about. We want to protect families because the protective order is available for people who live in the same household or have a relationship with each other. You've either been married by blood, you've been married, or you are somehow related by blood or adoption. Children, so in cases of child abuse, There may need to be a protective order. And so that goes to the crux of our community, the family. But then we also have to protect law enforcement because it is law enforcement who serves these protective orders or who are the ones who would receive these firearms from a prohibited person. I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm going to talk again some more about the protective order itself. So these are some of the actions that allow you to get a protective order. You feel that you are in immediate threat of serious bodily harm, and that you have that fear of that harm. You may have been assaulted in any degree. You may have been raped or have some sexual offense, attempted rape, false imprisonment, criminal stalking, revenge porn, criminal harassment, criminal trespassing, malicious destruction of property, and some more things that go in there. The point is that those are all very scary things that I just named. And if we put a firearm on top of those items, then it makes it even scarier. And the fear factor goes up. But as it stands now, when there is a interim or temporary order, there is no requirement, and even in the final, but there is no requirement that someone you live with, someone who has raped you or stalked you or assault in any degree, there is no requirement that that person must give up their guns. That is completely and totally illogical. We've already said that the bar for a protective order is that you have to have an immediate fear. Okay? We've said that already exists, but it's okay for the person you live with or the person who has caused this immediate fear to have this gun. No, it has to be a must relinquish. It has to be that the court requires the individual to relinquish that gun because that threshold is where it is. It doesn't say that they could possibly harm you one day. It already says that you have the threat of immediate bodily harm. So, as Senator Hettleman said, why would we send this individual who is brave enough and to come in and ask the state, help me, please help me, and give me a interim or temporary or a final protective order, and send them home with merely a piece of paper that says, okay, now you show this piece of paper and all problems will go away. Now you're already living with this person who has already threatened you in some form or fashion. To me, that doesn't make sense. And to me, it feels like we're asking for an honor system from someone who has already proven that they have some problem with conflict resolution. I think that is too much to ask of that particular individual, and it's too much to ask of the victim because we don't know what the trigger was. And sometimes the victim doesn't even know what the trigger is. So who are we to say that that trigger will not happen again? So if we really want to protect victims, the way we do it is we remove the firearms so that at least we know that that is a true form of protection. And that's why I like this bill so much. That's why I support this bill. The other thing that happens is, as it stands now, let's say the individual removes one firearm, but the victim knows that there's another one that they have. Oftentimes, I will tell you, and I am a practicing attorney, I don't practice criminal law, I have, but I have had some pro bono cases where the individual has told me, or the victim has told me, they put a gun to my head and they said they were going to kill me. Okay. I know where the guns are. I know where they are because I live with this individual. I know where they are. Why not take that victim a word and say, okay, we know that this individual should have at least 4 or 5 guns and they've only turned in one. Or why not let law enforcement, look it up and say, this person has only returned one, but we have a listing here that says that they are licensed for 4 or 5. Why not put the onus on the respondent, on the perpetrator? And that's basically what this bill is doing. It's saying you have the requirement to go in and return your guns. You must do this. And if you don't do it, there will be some serious consequences, as opposed to what happened across the street from my house, where they were dealing with a protective order. It was after the deaths of those individuals, that we said, oh, well, I guess that piece of paper didn't work. I guess that piece of paper did not save those innocent individuals and that child who is going to be facing a lifetime of the loss of his parents, and as well as the serious bodily injuries that he has received. So, with that said, you can see I am passionate about the bill. I am passionate about victims' rights. I am passionate about gun violence and protecting individuals against gun violence. Um, and this particular bill, I like because it doesn't simply utilize the honor system. It doesn't simply leave courts out there or the judges out there with no guidance, because we provide guidance to the judges. And we may even provide more guidance. I am, as it was mentioned, I am vice chair of judiciary. And in our committee, we're not afraid to ask questions. We're not afraid to make amendments and things of that sort. So we may provide more guidance. We may say that this is the language that you must use, court. We might say that you need to be a little bit more precise. You need to ask very specific questions about whether or not there is a gun in the home. In any event, and however the bill is eventually heard in our committee, I thank each and every one of you, because I know that you are here tonight on a Thursday at 6 o'clock because you care about this issue, because this is important to you, and that you spend your time thinking of ways to solve gun violence in our state, just like I do. So I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I will be able to stick around just a little bit, but thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Delegate Bartlett, and for that very good explanation as to why we feel so strongly, I think all of us here, about this legislation and how we need to move forward to change the present situation. So thank you. We are also joined tonight, and we're going to shift gears here just a little bit. We are joined here tonight by someone I just met last year during her first legislative session. Delegate Bernice Miracle North from District 14 in Montgomery County is smart and hardworking, and two of my absolute favorite combinations for folks to work with in Annapolis. Her Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act is a rare thing. It is a gun bill that seeks to bring resources to prevent and address gun violence. And in this particular budget climate where we're so hemmed in by what we can do if it costs money, bringing money to the table seems like a good way to go. So here to tell us more about that is Delegate Miracle North.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Karen, for that nice introduction. I'm very humbled by that. And I also want to give a shout out to Delegate Bartlett and Senator Hellman. Just thank you for, continuing to be in that fight to prevent gun violence and keep our community safer. It is not the most popular topic to work on in General Assembly, but the ones that do, we're doing it for the right reasons. So I just want to publicly thank you for that. So yeah, gun violence is a public health crisis. I think I'm preaching to the choir in this room about it, and it continues to devastate our communities, and it remains the #1 cause of death for children in Maryland. And so, we've had great progress in Maryland reducing gun violence cases, but that's really thanks in part to the targeted resources addressing the root causes of crime and violence. and dealing with support systems and our trauma centers, so making sure they have enough money, and make sure that we're actually respecting the work of our violence intervention programs and other community and family interventions that exist. But as we've kind of alluded to in earlier comments, we're having a budget crisis right now, and money for these programs are not guaranteed. And this budget season is just a prime example of how vulnerable the revenue streams for these programs that are successfully working in our communities is at risk. So to ensure a safer Maryland, I want to make sure that we're securing sustainable funding through new revenue streams. And that has to be done comprehensively, addressing the treatment and the prevention of gun violence, along with the trauma of our children, our families, and our communities. And I think if we're dealing with that, we got to try to get all the resources that we can offer. So the bill I'm reintroducing this session, it's now numbered House Bill 387, is, as mentioned, the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act, CCSFA for sure, if you want to have acronyms in your arsenal there. But it's going to establish an 11% excise tax on the gross receipts of firearms. Now, last year, I introduced this bill along with then State Senator Sarah Elthroth, and we had a more expansive number of items to tax. It included accessories and ammunition, but this year I just wanted to focus on firearms and firearm dealers, because we want to make sure that dealers are also held accountable for all the profits that they're making, because sometimes when you're dealing with a responsible gun owner at the time of purchase, they might not be responsible later. And we have to make up for that. And I think having the dealers come to the table, we've already dealt with it with manufacturing level, is critical to show that they cannot be the missing piece of this puzzle and making sure that we have our community safe. So this bill is going to distribute the revenue from this excise tax through several different areas that I will go into a little bit later. But I first wanted to go into why this bill even came about. So for all my legal nerds, there was a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin in 2022, so just almost 3 years ago. The Supreme Court confirmed the constitutionality of modern firearm regulations, so long as they're consistent with the Second Amendment's text and historical understanding. So currently in federal law, we have the Pittman-Robertson Act of 1937, which the proceeds of that excise tax at 11% is directed towards wildlife conservation efforts. Historically, we've done this before, folks. We've done this before, having a tax for a particular purpose on guns. So this bill is really designed to conform with the legal precedent already established with longstanding law. Now, last year, I don't have the fiscal note yet, so I'm going to give you the numbers based upon last year's version of the bill, and that'll give you a sense of, at most what we can possibly get from this tax. Last year's version of the bill, which included firearms, ammunition, and accessories, we were told would generate $18.7 million in FY 2026, increasing to $24.3 million by fiscal year 2029. So naturally, it's going to be a little bit less in the firearms, but what I recall in preparation of the bill last year is that the firearm revenue was pretty much the bulk of the money that would be raised with this excise tax. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the fiscal note to get you guys a better estimated number as to how much it's going to raise. But with an era of continuous profits from the gun industry, this is something that I think it just makes sense to do, to hold dealers accountable in collecting this money. And it'd be the dealer's responsibility to pay for these excise tax through excise tax return to the comptroller. And so the bill is going to fund critical services, which include the following: the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund, the R. Adams Crowley Shock Trauma Center at the University of Maryland, the Gun Violence Intervention and Prevention Program Fund, within the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention, as well as under the same division, the Survivors of Homicide Victims Grant Program. It is also going to fund the Center of Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention, which is the new program that was initiated last year through legislation, and that's going to be housed in the Department of Health. And I believe the executive director just started this year, so it's a relatively new center. And this is something new this year. I also added the Coordinated Community Supports Partnership Fund under the education article. And this is really a product of the work on the blueprint for Maryland's future, addressing student behavioral health. So I wanted to make sure that we had really a comprehensive approach, because as I mentioned, gun violence is number one cause of death for children. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore the traumatic effects that gun violence has on our youth. And so their mental health, their behavioral health is really important for me to address. And I was glad to add this to this version this year. One thing I wanted to mention, I get this question a lot, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of dive into it, is out-of-state sales. Because the national reaction I've heard is, okay, well, we do this tax, everyone's going to run to West Virginia or Delaware, or whatever, and get a gun. Well, in terms of out-of-state sales, this bill is we're going to require taxes to be collected and remitted from out-of-state sellers who sell firearms to Maryland residents in the same manner that we do for sales and use taxes. And that's based upon a legal decision known as the Wayfair decision. And so this will come into effect for both online purchases or when someone physically purchases a gun in another state, because it has to be, by Maryland law, it has to be sent to a Maryland federal licensed dealer. That's already law. So for the taxes to apply, though, the out-of-state dealer has to have like at least $100,000 in gross revenue for it to apply, or has to sell the firearm to Maryland residents in 200 or more transactions. So there is a way to get the out-of-state purchases of guns and have this contribute to the revenue that this bill will hope to generate. So I know a lot of people talk about that, so I wanted to get that out of the way and explain that. But yeah, this is a situation where, as I mentioned, gun violence is the number one cause of death for children. It has cost us Marylanders over $1.3 billion a year, 294 million of which is funded entirely by taxpayer dollars. So it's obvious that gun violence imposes a particular burdensome cost, not just on our trauma centers, but in our communities, in our schools. And I hope this bill alleviates some of that burden. So yeah, I'm happy to stay around for a few minutes for questions, but thank you for the opportunity to explain my bill tonight. Oh, I want to give a special shout out to Delegate Fellmark for being one of my many co-sponsors on the bill. I know she's on the call tonight.
Thanks for doing that. I had forgotten that.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. So, so thank you for being here tonight and for explaining these bills and why they are so important. I am going to now share my screen. Hopefully this is where things go awry most of the time for me. So, bear with me. Maybe. That's the wrong screen. All right, let me try this again. Okay. I think this will maybe work this time. All right. All right, can everybody see that? Excellent. All right. So this is where I'm going to just jump into some information about gun violence prevention, just data generally, and then we'll circle back to the bills, and hopefully I think we've worked in enough time for at least a few questions at the end of the presentation. So it's long been a focus of Marylanders to prevent gun violence, to advocate for policies that protect lives. Gun violence prevention is a fairly complicated web of state and federal policy and law that do everything from punish wrongdoers to resource programs that are lifting up families to provide them with a safer future. One thing we know for sure is that we cannot incarcerate ourselves out of gun violence. We certainly can, and we must utilize law enforcement and the justice system to address violence once it happens, but we must find more pathways to prevention. So let's take a moment and talk about the good news. You may have seen some of the recent press about gun violence and violent crime numbers being down. Recent FBI reports indicate that violent crime nationwide decreased by an estimated 3% in 2023 compared to the previous year. Specifically, murder and non-negligent manslaughter saw an estimated nationwide decrease of 11.6%. Early data for 2024 shows that this downward trend has continued. Since 2021, statewide, homicides are down 32%, while Baltimore City saw 201 homicides in 2024, which was a recorded 41% decrease over that span of time. There are a lot of reasons for these decreases, and certainly we are not anywhere near where we really need to be, but we are moving in the right direction. And critically, we've had a few years now of local, state, and federal agencies really communicating, working together, and really critically funding the programs that need to be funded. And we just, well, I'll circle back to that. So whenever I have a little bit of time within presentations, I always like to remind Americans that this gun violence is normal thing that we have going on here is so not normal in the rest of the world. Excluding areas in active war, the United States has the second highest number of gun deaths in the world. Brazil ranks first, while the US comes in second. When we shift to talking about gun death rates, our numbers are more accurately compared to some of the most violent places on the planet. El Salvador, Venezuela, places where the major driver is the presence of gang and drug activity, political unrest, and economic meltdowns. Basically, the combinations of an unstable social system plus guns. In contrast to this, are countries where gun deaths are exceedingly rare, like Japan, the United Kingdom, Norway, Australia. These are nations that have significantly reduced firearm circulation through legislation and other measures, resulting in phenomenally low rates of gun violence. And I want to bring this up because I think it's crucial to understand that we do not have to live with over 47,000 people dying from gun violence each year. So do guns make us safer? We get this question a lot. We must constantly push back on this narrative that guns are a reasonable response to safety concerns. It is true that gun ownership can provide a sense of security for someone who is being mindful of safety concerns, but there is a wealth of information that tells us that having a gun in the home increases the risk of accidental shootings, domestic violence, and suicide. While guns are often viewed as tools for self-defense, studies show that they are rarely used successfully in such situations. For every instance of a gun used in self-defense, there are far more incidents of accidental shootings, homicides, and suicides. Higher gun ownership correlates with higher gun-related injuries and deaths, and this is especially true in communities with elevated rates of gun violence, where more guns often escalate conflicts rather than resolve them. Many people own guns because they see them as essential for protection in dangerous environments. But the research on gun possession and community violence, particularly in high crime areas, reveals a troubling pattern. The presence of guns often perpetrates cycles of violence rather than breaking them. Recent studies on African American men aged 15 to 24 living in high crime cities highlight how guns are perceived as a necessary response to danger. And yet this reliance on firearms frequently either leads to further violence or legal challenges and diminishing safety overall. While individuals may feel that owning guns makes them safer, the broader data is pretty clear that guns lead to more gun-related harm. So to truly enhance safety, we must focus on strong, sensible gun laws that prevent dangerous individuals from accessing firearms, community violence prevention programs that address the root causes of gun violence and provide nonviolent solutions. And we have to continue to address the wide disparities in our society that limit access to quality education, to housing, to healthcare, food, economic opportunities, among other things. All right, so enough of the preaching. Now let's turn to policies. So we know that meaningful change requires more than just talking about the problem. It requires action. So over the years, we've proven that smart, evidence-based policies can save lives and make our communities safer. Maryland has been a leader in this space, and I want to take a moment to highlight just a few examples of the progress we've made together. I've already mentioned this one, Jalen's Law, ensuring safe firearm storage to protect children and families. We've passed extreme risk protective orders, empowering families and law enforcement to prevent tragedies before they occur. And back over, gosh, I guess it's over a decade now, Firearm Safety Act of 2013, which strengthened background checks and banned assault weapons. These policies were not easy to pass, but they were necessary and they work. The data shows the impact of these laws on reducing gun violence in our state. But as we know, the work is far from over. Each year brings new challenges, and we must continue to build on these successes. This year, we have a strong set of initiatives that aim to close gaps in our laws, improve enforcement, and expand resources for violence prevention. In this next section, we're going to dive into the policies that you just heard about. And, oops, I'm hitting the wrong keyboard. For my next page here. Why is it not working? There we go. And then I just lost everything. Oh, here I am. Sorry. So as you've heard from our legislators, we have two main priorities this year, including the addressing the relinquishment of firearms in domestic violence settings through the Family and Law Enforcement Protection Act, and funding violence prevention initiatives through the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act through an excise tax on guns. The Family and Law Enforcement Protection Act takes critical steps to address gaps in gun surrender process. Under this legislation, gun surrender would become mandatory earlier in the court process, establish clear and enforceable deadlines, and provide respondents with clear instructions on what they need to do and how to comply. Additionally, it will explore the creation of statewide procedures to ensure that dangerous individuals don't slip through the cracks. As you've heard, the legislation is sponsored by Senator Hedelman and Delegate Bartlett and is the product of months of collaboration with domestic violence victims advocacy groups, gun violence prevention organizations. It's also included critical conversations with Maryland State Police, the Association of Chiefs and Sheriffs, and the Maryland Judiciary. These discussions have helped us understand how current systems function, identify where they fall short, and determine how to build solutions that work effectively for everyone involved, leading to safer outcomes for our communities. If you're interested in learning more about the intersection of women and firearms, I encourage you to visit our website. There you'll find a collaborative policy paper developed by MPGV alongside Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, ROAR, and Community Justice. Additionally, you can stay tuned for upcoming newsletters where we'll share concise one-page documents explaining the bill and offering talking points to guide your conversations with legislators. Some of these things I shared with some of you earlier today, but we'll be pushing them out in our newsletters as well. So shifting gears, I'll talk about the tax bill. The Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act, sponsored by Delegate Miraku North, would place an 11% excise tax on the industry profits from gun sales to provide funding for a variety of initiatives addressing and preventing gun violence. As I previously mentioned, gun violence and violent crime numbers are down. And again, while there are a lot of reasons for this, it has been critically important that local, state, and federal agencies have been communicating, working together, and funding these programs that do the work. This week, Trump shut down the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, shutting down that direct link that states and organizations had to the White House. We can only assume that the federal dollars are also going to be disappearing. So it is more critical than ever that we find our own solutions. And while the idea of a state level excise tax is a fairly novel idea, it is actually one that's rooted in some longstanding, as Delegate Miraku North pointed out, some longstanding laws. There have been federal excise tax on the industry for over 100 years. The profits of that tax go to offset the harmful impact of hunting on wildlife, and it is long past time that the industry be held to account for their products' harmful impacts on humans. So, what can you do? I recognize, actually, looking around, that there are actually many seasoned advocates here, so many of you already know what to do and how to get started. But for those of you who are newer, there are all kinds of ways for you to be involved and to help get these bills over the finish line. First, let me again thank you for being here tonight or watching this recording. That was step one. As I mentioned, we'll have one-pagers and talking points available to you. Our partners at Moms Demand Action are hosting their annual rally and lobby day in Annapolis next week. That's January 30th. I've already bought my electric hand warmer, so I'm ready. This year, we are launching a new initiative, or this is Marylanders. So this year, Marylanders is launching a new initiative with a couple of virtual lobbying events, which might be of interest to folks who either cannot, or do not want to trek all the way to Annapolis in the freezing cold, or maybe you're just interested in doing an extra little bit more. These are going to be Zoom-based calls where we will connect you with legislator contact spreadsheets and a mission or a message for the day. And then you will help do emails and calls, as much outreach to legislators as we can manage. So those two events are currently scheduled for February 11 at 1 p.m. and February 27 at 3 p.m. This is new. We're just trying this out. So I don't know if we've got the timing right. I don't know, if there's things that we're going to have to play around with whether this works well, but we've been getting interest in doing some of these things. So we'll see. Please feel free to join us with those. So through the shifting sands, though, of session, we do reserve the right to adjust that timing if it's needed. If one of the hearings get placed right on top of it, we will have to switch it around. We'll see how that goes. And since you are here, you are most likely already getting our newsletter emails, but if not, please go to www.mdpgv.org and sign up. So you'll be able to stay up to date on all of those things, as well as any action alerts that may be needed. And of course, once bill hearings are set, you may choose to submit written testimony if you have a compellingly relevant story to tell. Your oral testimony can be very effective. There are so many ways to get involved, and different things work for different people. So here are a few contact details if you need them. I know many of you are involved with some of our national better resourced partners, but we know that gun violence prevention policy currently and mostly happens at the state level. It is your state level group that is most in touch, I think. I guess I'm biased, but with what is going on in your state and able to really move things forward at times. So I ask that you consider supporting us with a donation if you are able. We're able to do lots of things with just small amounts of money. So anything you can do is appreciated. And we are going to move into Q&A now. Not very many minutes left, but we'll get a little bit in. Let me stop sharing my screen, and let's use the hand raise. And we already have somebody. Excellent. Go ahead, Bill. Why don't you ask a question?
Hi, Karen. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to make an observation that I was a Montgomery County prosecutor for a number of years, and I've been involved in criminal cases on and off for a long, long time. And the problem with gun violence has gotten worse instead of better over time. And it's probably at one of the worst points right now that it's ever been in. And my question goes to a YouTube segment that I saw over the weekend. There was a plastic handgun being advertised, that was very small, about the size of maybe 2 packs of cigarettes side by side, that held 4 38 caliber bullets, was plastic, and I didn't go on to dig into it any further, but it said if you go online and you want to buy one, here's the website, and you can have it shipped to wherever you would like to have it shipped. And I saw that, and I guess my question for Senator Hedelman and or Delegate Bartlett or whoever has an opinion, is that legal? Is there, if it is, shouldn't we try to find a way to regulate that?
Well, Bill, thanks for that question. I'll give you what I know to be true. I will tell you that um, I have a whole lot of information jumbled in my head from past sessions, and sometimes it's not as organized as I would like it to be. I will tell you that we have outlawed what is called ghost guns in the state of Maryland. So they are illegal. Those are those plastic type guns that one can have and can make. We've outlawed a few different types of guns in Maryland that have some, manipulation and things of that sort. I will tell you the list, we have not exhausted the list. And we have asked manufacturers. I mean, there are some manufacturers that have been specifically listed and called out on the work that they do and the guns that they allow individuals to manipulate. So that's my answer. I can do more research, and Karen may want to add more to it. But I can do more research on specifically on advertising in the state of Maryland and how what we can do to control that type of advertisement. Let me just ask you one question though. Was that do you recall if that was a local channel or was that like a cable channel?
It was on YouTube, so
Oh, I'm sorry, you did say that.
it was on
Yeah,
YouTube,
yeah.
and it was not actually what I'm not sure about the exact definitions with a ghost gun, but this was a fully assembled gun that was, you could put it in your purse, you could hold it, you could almost hold it in your hand and hide it from view. It was so small and compact, but it was a standalone unit that allegedly you could buy online, and they would mail it to wherever you wanted it mailed.
So, Bill, sometimes what you'll find is, even though they say it'll ship everywhere, if you actually go to their website, because Maryland has such strict laws, it'll be like, except Maryland and California, Massachusetts, or whatever. Like, so
Okay.
they actually won't ship everywhere. I'll also say that if it is a fully illegal firearm, like if it's if it looks like a deck of cards and it really isn't legal, those are things that I think our Attorney General's office plays whack-a-mole with. These websites pop up,
Right.
and they manage to get them shut down, then they pop up somewhere else doing the same thing. So it's a struggle to figure out how to curb a lot of that stuff.
But it is important, Bill, and I agree with everything Karen said, so that but is not in contrast, that's just in addition to.
Sure.
We all of us have to report as often as we can. You telling me this is helpful. Now I can go back to the Attorney General and tell them. You might even be able to provide more details, which would be helpful. You can provide that to Karen or you can provide that to me. I will put my contact information in the chat, and then we can provide that over to the Attorney General's office.
Yeah.
But I agree, it is a game of whack-a-mole. I will say, well, I don't know, Karen, if you want me to go to 2024, but there was a bill that we passed where we put, it was a unique concept, but we did put some onus on the retailers, the gun retailers, to say that if you are selling guns to people where you would have a reasonable expectation that the gun would be used in a crime or that it is a straw purchase, then that retailer could be held liable. So yeah, it's always helpful to hear these types of anecdotes so we can make sure we report them accordingly, or we create we create a bill accordingly. No
Well,
offense, a pun intended, Bill.
I will make it a point to see if I can find it and on YouTube over the weekend. And Delegate Bartlett and Karen, if I can find it, I'll send it to both of you and go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. I have a running list of things to work on, so we can just put it on the list. We are just after 7. I want to be mindful of the legislators' time and just thank them for joining us this evening and for being so generous with their time and talking about these bills that I think are so very important. Like I said, be on the lookout for some action items, one-pagers, talking points. Reach out to me directly if you've got questions about how to get involved. And every little bit counts. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.